This is Lama Tantrapa. Thank you for joining us for this master class today. We are featuring the Dutch Qigong master, Rene Goris, who also goes by Chinese or Taoist name, Yu Li U.
Li O.
Really?
Yo is from swimming, and Li O is like is a title name. Li is your generation name, so I'm a 15th generation Udang Taoist. So this is why my title is Li, and O is to represent that I was the first European student in the monastery. And the combination of the name means basically your task is to study hard.
All right. Well, we're going to be studying hard with Yu Liu today. He's an expert in all things related to Taoism, Tai Chi, energy cultivation, etc. And he's also one of the few Europeans who received a significant amount of training in Taoism. And we'll be diving today into the secrets of Taoist Qigong, exploring the distinctions and similarities between Qigong versus Daoyin versus Tai Chi and related disciplines. And hopefully our guest today will also reveal some of his controversial secrets or things about ways we can practice energy arts. Welcome to our masterclass, Yu Liu.
Welcome.
Let's dive right into the subject matter of Taoism. We are talking about religion, or are we talking about philosophical Taoism?
Okay, philosophical Taoism doesn't exist. That's one thing. It's probably
I
something
warned you
that
he's going to be talking about some controversial things, so he already
yeah.
dismissed the
No, that's just the first thing. There's Taoism or there is no Taoism. What people usually call Taoist philosophy is actually Neo-Confucianism.
Well, so there's Confucianism, and there's confusion in that they confuse Confucianism with Taoism. Why is that?
Well, certain branches.
Taoism kind of arose almost as a counterbalance to Confucianist thought, in a sense, closer to nature side of things as compared to Confucianism.
In the West, the Confucianism has a very bad rep because they associate it with Qing Confucianism. And Qing Dynasty Confucianism is what gave us the interpretation of the I Ching that everybody's using, and these kind of things. The commentaries are sexist, racist, homophobic, and so forth and so forth. So in our case, we are not supposed to be like that. So we can't really follow this because all these gardenscapes and stuff like this with palaces and cities and so on that they have in China, these are Confucian ideas. They're not Taoist ideas. Although Taoism,
well, I'm talking about Confucius himself. He wasn't really a metaphysical guy. He was a relatively straightforward, down-to-earth kind of bureaucrat, right?
We just don't know.
We don't know. Okay. Well, so Taoism, that's what we were really interested in. Let's take a look at what Taoism is and isn't.
Taoism in itself is basically science.
Not religion.
But this is, well, they see themselves as a science, right? And they incorporate in their science metaphysics, mysticism, revelation things, and they separate themselves in two groups, namely followers of Tao and students of Tao. And this is what you usually see as Daojia, what is usually called philosophical Taoism in the West. These are people who think Taoism or Tao can be interesting, while the Taoist followers, the Taoist practitioners, actually are the real Taoists because they try to apply that. So you can see Taoism as a form of applied science. So it's not a theoretical science necessarily, although there is some theory involved, of course, also.
Right. Well, and of course, also whether science probably depends on whether or not they use scientific method. Research and understanding
every culture has its own scientific method. So when you say words like scientific methods, yes, that's correct. But you have to take into consideration that you have to use their scientific method, not yours.
Well, and what is their scientific method? What is the method
I
that
should open the curtain and show you 36 books of the Tao Tang. I said that's
Oh
their
no, no,
scientific.
please don't show me any books.
No,
We're
no.
talking today.
That's why I say I should. Um, their scientific method is based on the experience of life as a whole and the role of people in that life and how people can become part of the totality of that life and therefore never die.
So there is a certain holistic way of looking at things.
Yeah, you can say that in a way. Yes, yeah, you
Well,
can say.
the scientific method of knowledge usually is associated with testing and comparing and developing certain awareness of things that prove to be
Yeah.
statistically true over time. And I'm curious whether Taoism is still considered a science, or from that point of view, it's more of a religion, mysticism, or a cult to magic.
No, because the processes in your human body are very slow. And at a certain point, you know, like, oh, this technique failed, right? Because it doesn't provide me with the things that I plan to have. And as a result of that, you have to go try something else. And you see the different Taoist classics, the text about how to reach immortality. You see that everyone describes his own experiments, basically.
Yeah, and immortality is only possible to really assess by the time the person is dead. So if a person died,
As a
they
field
failed to
experiment,
achieve
but you can
immortality.
see a lot of things coming on. I mean, if you start having premature health problems when you are, say, 40 or 50 or practicing 20 years, and you start having arrhythmia or something like this, or your joints start hurting you, then you know that your experiment at that moment failed. So that means you have to go investigate why it failed and how you correct it. So
So
it's
we're
not
not
like a
talking
passive
about
science, like
immortality
you
per
do
se.
exercise and then eventually you'll become an immortal. That's not how it works.
So maybe we're confusing immortality with wellness and longevity. So perhaps if a person wants to experience a decent level of wellness so that they don't have arrhythmia or rheumatoid arthritis or various other issues that may creep up with age, they are not necessarily immortal. They're just simply developing healthy lifestyle. They experience and enjoying wellness.
Well,
Now, longevity may come as a result of feeling well for a long time. Not all people who live long actually live well, but longevity is another aspect. And then immortality is kind of infinite longevity, right?
in a Taoist view, the idea is that health is a side effect of becoming an immortal. So anybody who strives for health, they will not achieve it because they don't strive for immortality. They can't have health because health is a long-term project, right? So health is not something that you have, but it is something that you do. That's a very important aspect of Taoism.
So, in
So at the
other words,
moment,
everybody fails at health because nobody achieves immortality.
yeah. So everybody's sick basically because they're dying, right? So the whole project of Taoism is that, like they say in a basic yin yang theory, for instance, they say yang originates in yin, right? So if you have a yin like a body, right, then at that moment that body has to be moved. So you move the body because of your intent and so on, and as a result of that, your body is doing things. If it's doing the wrong things, the yang is not strong enough to invigorate the yin so that you cannot make more yang. So it is an ongoing process of balancing the scales going up and up and up and up. If you have the wrong kind of theoretical framework, for instance, you start producing the wrong kind of things. Like, for instance, when people talk about energy, but in the Taoist perspective, right? I'm not talking about the Western perspective, but in the Taoist perspective, you create fire, right? And fire kills you.
If you're burning up and you experience fire or some heat, that leads to perhaps deterioration of your health because it's there may be some sort of inflammation going on in your body.
Yeah.
Now, if we're talking about energy, we don't necessarily talk about just fire because there are other aspects to energy. So we're not just burning up because we are interested in energy arts. We can also use more intelligent approaches, right?
Well, in the whole history of Taoism, and similar like in Buddhism and in Hinduism, there is no concept of energy. This is a created term which only became popular from the 1980s, 90s, and now we call everything energy. And we compare everything with energy because this is how we perceive things.
It seems to be a pretty aspect of Chinese language, Mandarin language, And of course, prana is a well-known Sanskrit term, has been around ever since Sanskrit was used. And lung is energy in Tibetan, which has been around for just as long. So in other words, it's not been something established in the 80s and 90s. It's been established probably thousands of years ago.
It's in the 80s and 90s that people started calling it energy.
Okay, well, ancient Greeks call energy
They didn't mean the
associated
same
with
with
energy.
Westerners did.
Ancient Greeks moved to Central Asia
Yeah.
thanks to Alexander the Great conquest and assimilated some of the philosophies from India as well as China. So the idea of energy was not really foreign to those countries.
Well, first of all, the word qi in Chinese culture does not have the meaning that Westerners usually think about it. Um, if you, like, for instance, you have a heart, I always use the heart as an example. The heart moves, right? And that is called the yang. So the movement of the heart is yang, right? But at the moment when the heart is working perfectly, so the structure of the heart is good and the pumping is doing good, then at that moment there is qi, right? So qi is an indication of perfection of something. It is not energy, but it's the indication of the perfection of something. So in the case of Tao Qi, for instance, Qi is another kind of character. It's fire based on emptiness, right? But it means that Tao is doing its job perfectly. It's not being frustrated or whatever, and it doesn't create things which are malfunctioning. So if Tao is doing great, then at that moment it has a Qi. So the Tao Qi is a particular kind of Qi. And that kind of Qi is actually what we strive for in Taoism. And at the moment when we talk about the Qi that people usually use in their language, that term actually is an indication of the perfect functioning of something. So in Chinese culture itself, they started replacing it with the help of Western philosophy, dialectics, and stuff like this as such. But then they found that Westerners, they call it energy. And now they're changing their dictionaries to fit that term because the word qi for a long time could not be translated in the word energy. There was no similarity between the two terms. This is only for a few years it's added as a meaning because of the influence of the West. Semantics for understanding something is very important. And when we talk about Taoist practice, that's a very important part, right? Like, for instance, there's a nice example in an exercise I was planning to do later on in the session. One of the things that you see very often Westerners do, and you see that in China, a lot of people have taken that over because it's introduced in China as being Occidental science. That from ballet, people hang themselves on a thread, and that rope where they hang themselves on is based on the idea in ballet in the, I think, 18th century or something like this, that God moves the ballet dancer, right? So at that moment, you're hanging on that thread, but as a result of that, your
You're
spinal
like a
column is,
puppet.
yeah, you become like a puppet. Yes, exactly. So in modern practice, I mean, all of my life, Qigong masters from China, the same. They said like, oh, okay, you have to lift yourself on a thread and then blah 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 blah. While in reality, in the different Taoist masters, they said like, no, 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 you should not hang because you have to remain independent, right? If you hang like that, you're like a puppet. You're not independent. What you have to do, you have to use your intent to prolong your spinal column so that the pathway is an open point, like the top of a vase, because your body on the inside is empty, right? And you want to become sensitive to the heaven chi, right? The will of heaven, basically. And you want to let it penetrate inside your body so that you can be moved by heaven like that. You want to interpret it. You don't want to be moved by it, right? And that is the same process that the earth does. So when you practice Qigong, you try to be like the earth. You don't try to specifically move like that. So one of the exercises we go do is standing, like how they traditionally do that, to try to open up ourselves and to become more like the earth.
Well, we just mentioned the Earth. Uh, Mother Earth has a wonderful power, the awesome power called gravity. And
Yeah.
then gravity pulls us down all the time. Luckily, we have a bone structure, the skeleton,
Mm.
that allows us to be upright or at least somewhat supported. The more aligned the skeletal structure is in alignment with the plumb line, basically the line that goes down to the center of planet Earth,
Yeah.
the easier it is for the bones to support the structure. So the
Yeah.
muscles can relax. That's basically the idea of sung or relaxation that comes from the bones doing the work. So
Mm. that
bringing the
that
top of the
again,
head on
that is
top
a
of the head
that is a
simply
that is a
means that
Western.
you're aligning the
Yeah,
skeletal structure, including the cranium, with the gravity force so that your muscles can relax.
you will see in the practice that we're going to do that the Taoists see that as an opposite. If you look at it, it was a really like frustrating moment for myself also to realize. So I understand if people have a problem with the idea. But the idea is that heaven presses down, brings things down, not just rain, but also gravity comes from heaven. If you look at the gravity theory from the Taoist perspective, if you look at the Western science, scientific idea is that, you know, gravity is a field, and it moves things in. But when in the Taoist perspective, if that gravity theory will be relevant, the gravity is pushing down. And as a result of that, we have to use our muscles to stay upright. Otherwise, we can't open the vase. That's what happens to a lot of animals because they
Well,
are.
luckily, we have bones which allow the muscles to.
So, what the Taoists say is you have to create relaxation in activity, right? So, when they talk about song, fan song, both, you have to make sure that your muscles are actively carrying your body, right? And your bones are hanging inside your muscles. Because
How do the bones hang inside the muscles
yes, exactly.
if they are the
No,
support structure?
so well, that's what Western biology thinks, but Western biology has been wrong about a lot of things a lot of times, and they're continuously readjusting their theories. And if you look at, for instance, somebody like Buckminster Fuller, and he talks about tensegrity, you see that there are a lot of different kind of support structures. And for instance, everybody talks about Jing, Qi, and Shun, but in the Taoist perspective, Jing is the way how you harness the structure of your muscles, not something that is sitting inside your body as a reserve liquid to measure your vitality or something like this, right? So the Jing is the way how you carry your body. If you sit properly and you are aware of the gravity pushing downward and you're feeling the resistance from the earth, your Jing is being created by the way how you build your body up. Right. So at the moment when you practice, when you sit, and for instance, you see people meditate, like with Osho, you saw this very often, and people are allowed to sit like that. And then their body basically is being compressed. So they create dampness inside their body. And then they think they have a calm mind, but in fact, they have a repressed mind as a result of the dampness inside the body. So what you want in Taoism is you want to create that kind of openness that maximizes your body. The only other culture that I ever heard that from was actually Native American culture from Canada. I was befriended for a while with a hula hoop sports person, the most muscled person I've ever seen. He would do hula hoop sports. It's a Native American sport, and you probably are aware of it. But he would do that with like 120 different kind of hula hoops, and his body was so incredibly muscled. And he said like similar like what Daoist said. He said like uh, the thing is not so much of trying to become muscular to do it, but you have to do something so that you can move all kind of things around. You turn it around, and but you have to maximize the volume of your body. And in Taoism, they say if you maximize the volume of your body, then all your organs, all your tissues, they will optimize in their functioning, so you don't have to die. That's also what you see when people become older; they become smaller and smaller, and as a result of that, they create more and more friction, and then they die.
Well, most of the body is made of fluid, not to mention the bones, of course. And fluids are known for not being compressible.
I'm
You
not. I'm
can,
talking about Taoist theory, right? I'm not talking about Western theory.
the Taoist water cannot be compressed, just like the Western water cannot be compressed.
They don't talk about water in the same sense like Westerns. They talk about
Well,
water
any
as
any fluid, bodily fluids, 70-75% of body is water. You can't
they
compress.
don't they don't divide the body in that sense because you're a wholeness of all kind of things, and this wholeness is eventually what makes you immortal. It's not the parts of your body that make you immortal.
Right. So we're talking about the whole body then becoming bigger, essentially occupying greater volume.
Not in
Well,
the sense of growing more fat, right? But just occupying a
no.
bigger volume because you maximize your potential. So at the moment when I'm sitting here, if I would just shrink myself in like this, right, I'm much smaller, right? But because of sitting like this, I resist the will of heaven, so to say, the pressure of heaven, and I open myself up to the will of heaven by getting my body parts in the right alignment, right? And as a result of that, I feel great, right?
Like if you submerge yourself like the
Doing this,
Archimedes, who discovered that the volume of water displaced by the body submerged in the water corresponds to the volume of the body.
I'm
out of
talking
water,
about
whether you're slouching or you're straight.
I'm just talking about how you carry your body. Like some people, they have a barrel chest. Some people, they have tension in their hips or in their knees, or their spinal column is twisted and turned and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So by maximizing your body, you talk about simple physical processes of trying to rub out all the folds in your body so that all the processes in your body can go harmonious without being in.
Rubbing all the folds, which means basically, do you change the density of the tissue?
No, you change the tension
Well,
lines
if
or
if you don't change the density of the tissue, then the tissue is going to occupy the same volume, unless it changes the.
Okay, let's reformulate that. Yeah, yeah, you change the density of your tissues. Yeah, what I mean, what I was thinking about is like you don't change the nature of the tissues per se, except that you create more space for it, and as a result, that you also create more empty space, which you can fill up with more activity, so you become more alive. Because the point is to become more alive, not less.
Right. So basically, when your tissues are not as tense, like muscles are not constricted, for example, then the chi circulates easier, the blood and lymph flow easier through those tissues. In other words, you're more alive. I totally agree with that. How do you achieve that? A relaxation of the muscles by quitting struggling against the gravity for a change. In other words, you actually have to still delegate that issue of gravity to something else. Well, if you delegate it to the muscles, you will be tensing up the muscles. If you delegate it to the bones, you can actually relax the muscles.
I'm not going to answer that because you try to hold on to the Western anatomy and physiology thing, and the Taoist thing is try to move you to that other kind of system of thinking. So when you want to achieve something in Neidan or Qigong or Daoyin or anything like that, then you have to do that according to the rules and principles in the biology that is being set out by Taoism in the past time. And you see in different periods that they have different kind of ideas. I'm more specialized in Ming Dynasty methods. And as a result of that, I focus mostly on trying to apply that to my practice. And I can see the results both in me and my students and my
In other
clients
words,
in
you're
acupuncture.
using scientific method and you're checking the results to see whether or not your approaches work.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
great.
Yeah.
So principles. We were talking about the principles, and you mentioned that you would reveal some of the principles. So you already mentioned some of the ideas that perhaps can qualify as principles, such as chi, that is not what we think it is. It's not energy. It's something else. We don't still know what it is, but
Oh, it's clear. It's the perfection of the yang and the yin.
so functioning, like well-functioning structure, basically is the jing.
Yeah.
So what's chi?
What I said, the chi is the perfection of the yang. So if you're doing something right, like for instance, you're sitting and you're sitting properly, right? Then that sitting itself is the chi, sitting chi. Chi is always associated with what you're doing, not associated with a singular concept. So like Tao Chi, the Chi is associated with Tao. Heart Chi, the Chi is associated with heart. Tai Chi, when you are polarizing, right? Then the yang of your body is doing particular kind of things. So as a result of the polarization, if the polarization is right, then there is a Chi. But if the polarization is not right, there is no Chi.
Well, so in other words, there can be Tai Chi without Chi.
Yes,
Interesting.
which mostly.
So speaking of Tai Chi, I'm talking about the integration of yin and yang.
Yeah.
Uh, Today is the equinox. It's the day when the
That's
length
true.
of day and length of night are more or less the same. So how do we achieve that greater balance between yin and yang?
Years of practice.
Practicing something in particular?
No, there's no the whole thing within Taoist perspective is not like you have to do a particular kind of set of exercises and then you get there, but you have to figure out what is the nature of your own body, your own mind, and your own feelings, and so on. The place where you live, and so on. All these things have to be integrated, and you have to search gradually through different methods of and combining different methods how you can achieve that. So it's not like a one thing fits all thing, right? you have to continuously, in a very practical sense, you have to try to adjust your body and readjust throughout your life to get to a certain kind of point.
Well, so adjustment of your body is an important part of that practice. I understand we're talking about
Let me let
creating
me let me
lifestyle.
let me explain how we do that in our school, because maybe that makes it a little bit more clear. Because if you look at what people need to become healthy or become more functional, or even if it just is about being immortal, I'm not saying that immortal is on the foreground of most people, right? But that is the Taoist agenda. Uh, but at the moment when you look at all the different kind of things, you see that some people need this, some people need that, some people need that, and over the course of your life, you need different things for different age groups. So what I set out to do as part of my PhD research in the past is to set out a program where most of these things are being addressed, and then you can figure out things while you're going. So you have to get experience with something, and then you have to combine it with something else, and you have to recombine and recombine, so that you create your own perfect formula. What I saw that most Qigong masters make as a mistake, and why they die in that sense, is that they at a certain point think like they've got it, and then they go teach what they got to other people, right? And these people, they come with a limited version of the reality, right? They come with a simplified version, and the simplified version is never correct, right? It is always the complex version through which people can simplify. So you need the complex version. So I created a complex version where people can go through different kind of stadias throughout their life, which they need. As in,
The
like what we
complex
call
version.
practice today is one of the root practices of Tai Chi Chuan, namely the development of Jing, and how that actually works then for Qigong through the bamboo Qigong.
So you
As
said
an
you developed a complex version, but you didn't clarify the version of what?
version of a practice system, right? So you have to have skills in particular kind of things. Like for instance, settling the breath in the proper way is a skill, right? Standing in the proper way is a skill. Making your internal organs function in the proper way is a skill. Finding the proper alignment from your bones and your muscles is a particular kind of skill. So different practices provide that. They are not present in one kind of Qigong or Daoyin or anything like that. As at the moment, when we talk about, like, for instance, now what we talk about here in this session about bamboo qigong, you are talking about the way how the body is being aligned, and you go through a sort of shape shifting. Actually, you see your body as a bamboo plant, right? And a bamboo plant, if you look at the nature of a bamboo plant, it's not just the stick and the nodes in there, but it's also the leaves, and it's also the roots, and it's also the kind of soil it stands in, the accommodation of other plants, and so on and so forth, right? So you have to see that in a larger perspective. And in Taoism, the bamboo is the symbol for the change from being a normal, ordinary mortal to wanting to become an immortal.
Oh,
Boo,
I
yes.
see what you're saying.
Ah, okay,
You're
okay, okay,
saying
okay. Yeah,
bamboo,
yeah, the
as
bamboo,
if it sounds
yes.
like a bubble.
Yeah, I can imagine. So at the moment when you become like that, you're going through this kind of a transformation, this sort of shape shifting. You're changing yourself into this bamboo plant. But within the Qigong itself, because of the way how you progress over time, you also recreate yourself from a bamboo plant into a crane. I think it's the bird that flies to heaven. So that's a metaphor you go through your practice. So you're in a continuous shape shifting where every day when you practice you add something to get to that point, but this is only the lowest level of practice, right? So then at the moment when you go start practicing, you have to come to the idea that Taoism as a science, it says you have basically to start with, you have three levels of practice to deal with, and the first level is usually where most people start, and the second level two is either you're sub-healthy or you're sick, right? So you have problems that are causing you to eventually die, or you are in this very slow, gradual grind where you gradually wear off and still die. Yes, yeah. I was looking for the right word. Dissipate. um, but on the third level, you start getting really very serious about the way how your body works, and at that moment, the intensity is also very much bigger than what you would do at the beginning level, and then you see that what is required is a 24 hours attention span for your development to become to that immortal thing, because you're 24 hours you are alive even when you're sleeping. So the Taoist agenda tries to incorporate all these different kind of aspects of your life, and for instance, it doesn't really agree with going to sit in a cafe and eat beef or something or drink a beer. These kind of things, they are basically at the moment when you become a Taoist, these are finished. And that's basically what most people think like, oh, that's great to do. As a Taoist, you have to find your pleasures in other things, namely in the different victories about what you can
Beef,
do.
no beer.
No
Okay.
beef, no. Yeah, that'd be disappointing for many
Where
people.
do you get vitamin B's from?
Oh, there's a lot of different kind of ways to get all kind of nourishment, and the idea is that you learn to adjust your nourishment to what you need, not to what you like. So eating beef doesn't give you your vitamin B. Beans can provide the same, nuts, mushrooms. There's all kind of things that you can eat for vitamin B, and for vitamin D, E, whatever, all these kind of things. They can come from all kind of sources. But the main reflection, that's the scientific part of it, is like for instance when you talk about food, is like how does your body respond on it? And I'm sure you have heard of biku. Biku comes in 5 different kinds, and in the different kind of biku, you continuously adjust the ways of nourishment of the body. So you have to reconfigure what is nourishment, and exercise is just one way of nourishment.
Well, that's interesting to look at exercise as a nourishment because most people look at exercise as actually the ways to exert effort and burn some calories, not nourish the body through exercise.
The gym.
Oh, you don't have to go to the gym. You can go for a walk in the woods. It's still going to burn energy.
No,
Um,
gym. It's the
but
same.
you may also get nourishment from breathing fresh air. So there's that.
Yeah.
um, the principles that you just described are really interesting. So essentially, we're talking about not just creating a particular practice, but creating a lifestyle that would have a holistic approach that would integrate your nutrition, your exercise, your sleep, or maybe you don't sleep because you said you maintain 24-hour mindfulness, right? Um, how does it work
Awareness.
exactly?
Mindfulness is a little bit of a loaded concept nowadays, but awareness, yes.
Yeah, well, you said the 24-hour attention span, and mindfulness, by definition, is the ability to pay attention for an
Yeah.
extended period of time.
The thing is, Confucius, for instance, he made a joke about a particular student. He said, like, this is my best student. He is concentrated for three days per year. So this is basically what we struggle with. And when I was practicing 10, 12 hours a day, my teacher said I was lazy. So it's very difficult to develop a 24 hours attention span.
Well, one of the things that I teach and practice is Tibetan dream yoga, learning
Yeah.
how to pay attention to the process of dreaming and
Yeah.
becoming awake in the dreams, both happening during the night and also those that happen during the day.
No, in Daoism, that is the same, but it is not about that part because that's not your awareness necessarily. It's about how you keep developing your body during your sleep.
Okay, so how do you do that?
That's very easy. You have to practice a lot, and until eventually you never really go to sleep.
Okay, so you become an insomniac?
No, that's what some people seem to think. No, 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 because there's different ways of being awake, of course, right? Like in dream yoga, you are awake within your consciousness. In practices like Buddhism and Burn to a particular degree, also mind is everything. But in Taoism, mind is being seen as a tool, not as a main thing.
Okay, so how do you practice then during the night?
Well, like for instance, if you're on the third level practice, right? You practice what I then teach is Qigong, and in that sense, you learn to establish yourself in a cosmological reality, and the things that you need for ritual and so on. And at the moment when you get into that kind of practice, then at that moment you create a surplus, you can say, of awakeness. And that means that you will need less food, less sleep, and so forth and so forth. So as a result of that, your days become longer. That means you also have more time to practice.
And you extend it
But
more and
in
more and
theory,
more
you can
until it's
extend that
24
till
hours.
24 hours. But my teacher always said, like, well, you need about 2 hours, 3 hours, just uh, to reset yourself for the next day. But like, for instance, there are particular practices, like for instance, in relationship to the water god and the development of karma, that every 15th of the month, the moon month, you're not supposed to go to sleep the whole night, and then the next day you have to continue, because otherwise the Hun and Po would leave your body and they would report all the things where you sinned or you did do bad things for your health to the water god, and it will be registered, and that is to help you develop uh, your karma for the next year. And the water god actually is going to be busy, I think next month or something like this, or
It's
November.
interesting that there's like some sort of syncretism or combination of the Chinese superstition with the Indian idea of karma. I mean,
Uh, Taoism absorbed through Zhuangzi Taoism, they absorbed a lot of Buddhist ideas, and the ideas of karma they resonated. They say like, okay, we have already so many different kind of guild systems, we can have another one. And as a result of that, they incorporated it in practice. And but nowadays they call it karma, but they usually said like when you do bad things, this is going to be reported, and it depends on the counting of your bad things and your good things, how long you will live, right? So they say like in Taoism in general, they say your goodness determines to a large degree how old you're going to be, right?
so
So for Taoist medicine, for Chinese medicine in general, your morality is a very important factor in developing your health.
interesting. So they still operate very much in this dualistic way of thinking, distinguishing good and bad, like sort of black and white,
No, you have to see that as damaging and non-damaging.
damaging and not damaging of what?
Your health.
Okay, so this is basically the health is the major priority, and everything that you do that
So
improves your health is good karma.
morality should be seen in that perspective.
Interesting. So, for example, if you see another person eating something other than beef, apparently, uh, then it's okay to take that from that person as long as it nourishes your body and improves your health.
Uh, yes. So when people are sick, for instance, they provide very often medicines which contain either fish bone or pork or beef bone or something like this. But that is the main moment where you will need meat. Normally in your daily life, you basically don't need any meat. It's not that I would advocate vegetarianism per se, but food awareness is a very important aspect of not needing meat, because meat very slowly digests and is the reason why a lot of people develop all kinds of chronic diseases.
Oh,
First of
yeah.
all, because of the stress of the animal that you have to deal with, the stupidity of the animal sometimes, and you have to digest all these things, because when you eat something, you also eat its karma.
Although people who don't eat meat often are sickly, more so than those who do eat meat. Could
Well,
that be
yeah, that is the
actually more?
idea, but it's not actually true. But all
Well,
research shows that actually not the case. People who don't eat meat live actually on average 2 years longer than people who do eat meat.
that's an interesting statistic I never heard of. But so the principles that we are talking about, besides the good and bad karma, eating or not eating this and that, um, in terms of practice, what could our viewers learn and take away from watching our masterclass today?
I think the most important thing is that you have to develop your life in practice. And that is not just doing exercises, but you have to apply the principle of the exercises in your daily life. So if you
Which
don't
principle?
apply the principles of your daily life, you basically say like, now I'm living, now I'm exercising, now I'm living, now I'm exercising. Well, in fact, the exercises are there to make your living into a big exercise, so that you can extend your understanding uh, of yourself, your body, your life, and so on, within a more large context.
Right. So instead of exercises for like a certain set amount of time, we're kind of infusing our life with
Yeah,
practice.
yeah.
Well, so what are the specific practices that we are infusing our lives with?
When you're standing with your feet together, or you're standing with your feet a little bit wider, or you're standing shoulder wide, or you're standing with your feet wide like an old man, or you're standing in a wide stance. All these kind of postures, they do something with your spinal column, right? So different exercises do different things. When you're standing like this, are you standing on your front foot or on your back foot? Anthropological research shows that standing on your front foot actually enhances the chance for back problems. So within Daoism, actually, fortunately, we learn to stand on the heels, right? Most people nowadays, they walk on the front foot because of the way how we develop shoe behavior. But standing on the heels is a little bit like standing on stilts. But as a result of that, you get an upward push into your spinal column, which helps you to make your spinal column more long and more straight. And you use these kind of natural processes to enhance the way how your body works. So at the moment when you're standing shoulder wide and you're standing with your feet parallel, you open up your sacral bone. And as a result of that, your spinal column is being lifted up a little bit more, right? Like that. As a result of that, you can use your muscles more actively in the standing process.
You just mentioned that the feet should be parallel to each other. Why?
Because like I said, at the moment when you stand parallel, your sacral bone is the area where people very often have back problems that actually is being open in the most way, in a large way. When you open your feet wider, you can feel it with your fingers on your lower back. At the moment when you spread your feet wider, you feel that your muscles close in. So that means that makes your lower
The
back
muscles are
more
doing what?
tight. Yes, the lower muscles that connect the large muscles from the spinal column
Erectors
uh,
connect.
with the hips. I just keep using simple language because that's easiest for everybody. So at the moment when you use this, then your muscles actually close in and they tighten up the space between the vertebra and the sacral bone. But at the moment when you're parallel, that is actually neutralized. It's, it's a very simple principle. So at the moment when you are standing like this, and you're standing, for instance, with your feet sunken, then you see that you automatically start lengthening your spinal column. You don't need to uh, uh, pull your tailbone in. It actually happens by itself. And at the moment when you also are able to push the vertebra from the chest a little bit forward while relaxing your chest, then at that moment your spinal column is being readjusted in a way that allows you to lift up the base of the skull and makes the pai hui actually stand up on the top of the head instead of lifting a little bit backward. Because most people they stand a little bit like this, so the pai hui actually moves backwards, right? So at the moment when you're standing straight like this, you're standing just like this, or you're staying in a straight posture like this, and your feet are parallel, then at that moment you have already created a lot of preconditions. The moment when you put the Lao Gong on the Dantian, you're just holding it, right? You're not pushing, but you're just holding it there. Then your arms are active. They're not passive. They're not leaning or anything like that. So at the moment when you stand like that, you will slowly start noticing that your breath starts wandering through your body until eventually it settles in your dantian and your kidneys. And then you start getting belly breathing, natural belly breathing. So you don't breathe towards your belly. You ask, basically, you invite your belly to breathe for you, right? So that's like a reversed process, what people mostly do. The moment when that happens, your breath also slows down, becomes more thin. And one of my teachers said, uh, 3 minutes for a breath is the best way of breathing, right? So that means you have to slow down very much because it says when you slow down your breathing more, your awareness grows. Most people, when they breathe through the belly, they breathe towards the belly and then they force the air into the belly. But this is the
Well, there
opposite.
is no way for them to force air into the belly. They can only force air into the lungs. It doesn't go
Well,
anywhere.
for Taoist medicine, that is not the case because the lungs are only part of the body, and the lungs have to be connected with the kidneys. If they do not connect with the kidneys properly, you get the wrong kind of breathing because you separate them. In a worst case, then you get bronchitis or asthma or something like this, right? So at the moment when you're standing and the dantian initiates the breathing instead of the lungs or your will or anything like that, then at that moment you get like a natural breathing which can be applied to the whole of the body. So at the moment when you're standing like this, just standing like this, you open up these three gates, then your muscles become more active in resisting the gravity, which is pushing from the top. If you just imagine that the gravity is pushing from the top instead of pulling you from the bottom, you already start noticing you start using your muscles very differently.
And when you're using your muscles, doesn't that actually affect the quality of breath?
because you want it to be a natural passive system. It has to grow on you. And at the moment when you practice something like this and you try to force it, you become tense. But at the moment when you just wait until it really happens, then at that moment you stay relaxed. So you're minimizing the ecology of your body by doing things with as little effort as possible, while in the same time you grow the activity of your body.
Well,
So
weren't you
then
just saying that you're
that's
using the muscles to work against the gravity? So then you're not going to
not
get relaxed.
you only in your intention, but not like resisting the gravity like this, but you're holding like this. You're just standing straight and you feel the gravity pushing on you and you just passively resist it. You still activate your muscles. So otherwise, if you would not resist it, your muscles would start hanging and your arms become heavy and then all your body becomes basically drooping, right? So this is the opposite of that process. When you applied it in Tai Chi Chuan, say for instance you have a posture like this, you're standing like this, and at the moment when you're standing, you're still using your muscles. But at a certain point, when you stand for a long time, your jing comes up, and then your body opens up like this. So you see that the bamboo formula Qigong is intended to help you develop that process, so that you can apply it in, for instance, Tai Chi Chuan. Or when you're using strength to lift something up, I don't have something heavy here to lift up, but then at that moment, because of using the jin, the actual force which is lifting, is then guided through the natural slimming of your body. So you use much less uh, energy, fuel, to burn in your muscles. So you also don't create as much waste products. So you can see that the whole process of practice is in this case to help you economize the use of your body.
The movement economy of muscular effort is an important aspect of this practice, is that right?
Yeah. So of course, when you stand like this, I don't know your time that you dedicated for this class is almost finished. So, but when you practice this on a daily basis and you practice this for about half hour a day, you'll very quickly feel how your understanding of how your body actually functions changes. Because you start noticing your digestion improves, your heart rhythm becomes more calm, your breathing becomes more calm, your awareness increases. So you should, for instance, not close your eyes because then at a certain point you might fall asleep and you lose your attention. Yeah, I've seen
Well,
people
if you're
close their
standing
eyes and
meditation,
just
you're in
fall
trouble.
over. Yeah, because it's much less easy to keep uh, your balance fixed because your balance is created. Your balance is created by your eyes and your feet, right? Your ear balance is only maintaining your balance on the long term. Like if you're used to stand like this all the time, your balance will be balanced on that. So at the moment when you try to lift yourself up, you become dizzy, right? So at this moment, when you're standing like this for a long time, this adjusts. Yes, so this adjusts. But your eyes, they focus on the space around you. Your feet focus on the floor. And as a result, that your whole body, everything in between, adjusts. And this is part of the development of Qing.
You're also saying that the vestibulary apparatus is secondary way of feeling balance, and the primary is the eyes
No, I
or the
just
feet.
say that if you close your eyes, you will start falling asleep. And as a result of falling asleep, at a certain point, you forget your environment, right? So you can become aware of things to a certain degree, but certainly as a beginner, standing for a long time and standing still and finding stillness and clarity inside yourself is going to be quite a feat, right? So then you have to really start correcting yourself all the time, and that's a little bit like repairing a leaking boat, right?
In the beginning of our masterclass, you mentioned that you don't prescribe certain exercises to do. Instead, you infuse the lifestyle with a practice of awareness. And now we just learned the exercise that you suggested to do for half an hour every day. So I'm a
Yes.
little confused. Can you help me resolve?
No, you have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. Like if somebody comes with an individual program, they have to learn certain kind of principles. And a Qigong is to teach you particular kind of principles. And I think in that sense, it's important to understand the difference between different kind of practices. Like when you do breath practice, you have to have a particular kind of status of inner peace inside yourself so that your breath practice actually becomes efficient. If you do breath practice when you are not having that state, then you do what in Daoism is called military practice. You force your body to do particular kind of things. And as a result of that, you actually create more tension in your body than is necessary. At the moment when you do Qigong, Qigong is formulatic. Yeah? So at the moment when you do a Qigong, that's a set of exercise, follow a particular kind of order, and the whole set is actually the exercise. And at the moment when you look at individual moves, these are Dao Yin, right? Like for instance, you do a practice, for instance, for a headache, and you have only one exercise for that, then that is not a Qigong, that's a Dao Yin, right? Because you're trying to guide a particular kind of process inside your body. But the whole set of exercises is to teach you a particular kind of principle by learning the different keys in a process and following this up. So, like for instance, this bamboo Qigong that we're now talking about, it teaches very basic points about how to maintain balance and also how to resist pressure from your environment, how to create a more clear and calm mind, but also to become more aware of the interior of your body at the same time, while it is explicitly focusing on the exterior of your body, right? So it uses in constructivism in art. I don't know if you know anything about it, but in constructivism, they were showing forms by showing their anti-forms. Like they were not painting a vase, but they were painting the space between two vases. And as a result of that, you get this anti-form. In psychology, you have this psychological test. Which form do you see? That's basically originating in constructivist art. And in Taoism, you have a lot of similar kind of practices where you try to learn this, but you try to do it through that, right? And then you're not going directly to the point that you're going to, but you're going to another way. Like for instance, the bamboo qigong is a stage. It's a stage and a series of exercises. After the bamboo qigong, you're going to be restored enough because it's a harmonizing exercise to restore your health when you are relatively weak. And it's very good for elderly people. I use it for pregnant people to carry the fruit because you learn to align your body parts very good. And if you have been sick for a while, then it's a very good one to restore. When you are new in Qigong, it's very easy to learn the principles. So you come relatively quick into a very deep understanding of what your body actually is all about. And then you can go to the next level, like for instance, the Zhongwu Qigong, where you are being asked to work on a much stronger level where you stand in wide stance and you have to learn a much deeper level of understanding the Jing. So you start developing the alignment of the different body parts much deeper.
What do you
Funny,
need to
because my
specialize?
teacher told me about these kind of things, and he said like all these things that modern people talk about, it's all nonsense. And I'm doing a translation project where I find actually all the things that he was talking about, and they talk about Jing in a completely different way than we do nowadays in our modern westernized form of Qigong. So that's really very interesting.
And why do you have to stand in a wider stance to get a deeper understanding of your Jing?
Well, you try to open up the deeper tension in the body. In Taoism, they talk about karmic knots, for instance. And these are places in your body which are so tense that they are like almost permanent in your body, and they determine your fate, basically your future.
Holding
All
pattern.
the physical things or something like this, but just on the physical level. At the moment when you look at your body, you are constructed by all kind of tensions. Your character, even your psychological character, is because of your frustrations, right? Because of your pains, you can say. If you would be like a harmonious person, you would be like the most numb and flat person. You will not have any character or personality.
Yeah, we don't come across a lot of those folks, but I,
Hey, you're from America. Sorry,
yeah,
I couldn't stop myself making that joke.
yes. Well,
Oh, we
the
have
idea
the
of
similar
a
problems
flat,
here, so don't worry.
the idea is not to become a flat person, but to actually connect with all the energy resources associated with all those different emotional states, not to discard them, because that would be like tossing a baby with the bathwater, but actually learning how to use them under the appropriate circumstances and not use
The
them
interesting,
when
the
circumstances
interesting
come up.
thing, trying to show you a little bit of an opposite view in Qigong, in Daoyin, and so on. They never talk about traditionally. They never talk about reserves, right? They talk about actualizing your bodily memory.
Uh, when I talk about energy resources, I mean more like particular frequencies of energy. It's like energy flows, different frequencies of it are associated with different states of consciousness, different holding patterns, different emotional expressions, and so on and so forth. An ability to tap into those resources of universal energy flowing through everything, including our own bodies, gives us access to the broader bandwidth of abilities. And essentially, the abilities is what determines how well we do. So that's what you said is Jing in your tradition.
Yeah. Yeah. We really never. My students sometimes make jokes to me because they're never excellent, because everywhere they read about energy, and then in my class they're excellent and use the word energy, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're not supposed to use that word." Uh, I'm not necessarily against it, but I haven't found any proof for the concept of energy in Chinese culture. So this is the reason why I don't use it. I try to learn Qigong. I try to learn Daoyin. I try to learn about Chinese and Taoist medicine. All these kind of things are import words from another culture for whatever kind of reasons. They are used in China right now. But like when I first go to China, none of my teachers there understood the word energy. Nowadays, they all understand it. So
Well,
where this is where you see the difference. And
what you talk
they
about is a cultural appropriation of the foreign culture, because
they
you're
appropriate our
Chinese,
concepts
neither
too.
am I,
Yeah,
nor most of our viewers.
yeah.
So trying to appropriate some cultural traits or stereotypes um, inevitably leads to misunderstanding, and there's going to be some conflict because we basically are trying to grab onto some kind of
Actually,
cultural
before
details
you
that
called
are
me,
not part of our milieu.
I did a script for one of the videos on my Patreon on the same topic, uh, about how I perceived it. And actually, my ideas come from Ronald Reagan
And yeah, so how do you proceed?
because he was so irrational. I was like, oh, okay. So now we're getting into a whole different kind of reality about what culture actually means.
So culture means something other than what we normally mean by culture. Is that what you're saying?
Well, when in the perspective of other cultures, Europeans and Americans are pretty barbaric. They are
Well,
like
that's a
we are
judgment.
like the opposite of what we consider ourselves. And you can see that cultural views are usually a criticism when they talk about other cultures. When we talk about Chinese culture and we interpret it with our own language, we're actually criticizing it because we say you don't understand it, we understand it better, right? Because we use our words instead of trying to understand what they meant.
Right. Well, so in other words, what you're saying is that there is no way to understand another culture. We just have to adopt that culture.
I think it's very easy to understand another culture, but you have to live what you learn from that culture according to its rules. Like, for instance, um, when you become Islamic, for instance, nice example, you can become Islamic in ideas to a degree, but to really understand what it came from, you have to really try to learn as if you are a desert dweller, and you have to start wearing all this heat resisting clothing and so on, so that you can understand some of the restrictions. And then not the ideas that people later got that they put on top of it, through which it became at a certain point discriminatory.
Right. So is it what you're trying to do to become
No,
Taoist?
no, that's just another culture. It's a good
Yeah.
example because Taoism is not that radically different from our life, except that they try to uh, normalize taking care of yourself.
Okay. Well, there is nothing surprising or foreign about that. So creating the lifestyle where you're taking care of yourself and improving your health by connecting the dots between cause and effect, who wouldn't want that? When cultural stereotypes get ingrained or integrated, such as
Mm.
you have to do this, wear this, eat this, then it becomes a little bit less scientifically minded and more indoctrination. And uh, indoctrination usually doesn't lead to greater freedom; it actually leads to slavery. So, in other words, if I understand you right, you're saying that in order to really practice Qigong, you have to subject yourself to Chinese cultural indoctrination.
You have to enculturate a little bit more into the Chinese. When people come to me to study Chinese medicine, for instance, I give them a very large package of information over a period of 2 years, where they learn basic Jungian studies, right? But at the moment when they start combining theory with practice, they can prove what they're doing through in theory through their practices, and they can see how it actually works. And so this way they prepare themselves much better for eventual therapeutic work, or working for companies, or working for organizations, or whatever kind of things, or individuals to on a healthcare program. So the bamboo qigong is just a part of that, right? So at the moment when you start understanding the agenda of Taoist and Chinese medicine, from the Taoist and Chinese medicine perspective, you also start understanding more what the concepts actually mean, and how, in the way how we use it in the West in modern TCM, deviates from the original meaning. And as a result of that, we have recreated it into something completely different than it actually originally was.
Well, is the idea of growth and development of arts part of your way of looking at these arts? In other words, is there any room for improvement? Is there any room for evolution of the arts? Is it the living art, or is it dead art that has to be done
It
just
is
so as it was done 5,000 years
the
ago?
th the thing is their own theory has to grow. So if you change their theory, like the Cultural Revolution, what they did is they break the original theory and they westernized everything, right? So they agree with your idea, right? Because they don't want to be old Chinese, they want to be new Chinese, right? So as a result of that, original meanings, intentions, and products, and whatever kind of things, they're not allowed to exist in the same sense. For me as a Westerner, though, if I'm interested in Chinese things, I'm interested in where it doesn't become westernized, right? Because there is the exotic, there is where you can learn something from it, which is not already present in my culture. Because most people who practice Qigong, they practice basically the same what they did already do in the 19th century in Europe, right? The concepts that they talk about is basically the theories of hypnotism and magnetism, and maybe a little bit of spiritualism, which is nothing wrong with. I mean, I don't want to say like that is wrong, but it is not what they originally intended when they wanted to study Chinese medicine, or when they wanted to study Qigong, wanted to study Daoism, or Daoyin.
Hmm.
Like
Well,
for instance, for you, there's a nice example because you're a Burn Lama, right? So the thing that you would like to talk about is Burn Lama principles in your practice. No? Oh, okay, well
no,
then.
no, I reject affiliation with any particular culture.
No, yeah,
Uh,
okay. No,
I'm a
you used to.
cultural anthropologist by training, by education,
Yeah,
and I actually recognize how limiting it is to be identified with any one particular culture. So I consider myself a citizen of the world, or cosmopolitan, so to speak.
well, I do that too.
Yeah, and so I want people to discover their true nature through their explorations, and that's going to be the authentic experience that is going to lead people into living authentic life.
That is an interesting point. I mean, when you talk about authenticity, for Taoism, the authenticity is the immortal, and everything before is the failed product, right?
Well, and
So
since nobody attains immortality, I guess there is no authenticity to speak of.
authenticity, yes, exactly. So what they want is that you create this authentic person, right? So there's no authentic person within you, but in a Christian view, there is, right? But in a Taoist person, that authentic person has to be created. That's the immortal.
Right. So, and since nobody has ever achieved that, basically, it's a
That
full. Basically, the idea or the value of authenticity is not really highly valued or regarded because, well, it's a fool's errand. Um,
Taoism says, if you become an immortal in this society, it is not even possible to live there. So how do we know if somebody is an immortal or not? Give you a nice example that I was sitting next to my teacher in the Wudang Mountains, and there was a sport event, and there was this one older guy, and he was doing all kind of crazy stuff, and everybody was laughing like this is a clown, right? And I started laughing too, and my sifu he just gave me a bump in my rib cage, and he said like you shouldn't laugh about such a person because maybe he's an immortal coming to teach you something, and you would miss the message, right? So this is the Taoist perspective. You never know if somebody is immortal or not.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your
You're
wisdom
welcome.
and knowledge. This is fantastic. exploration of Daoism.
You're welcome. And you also, thank you for inviting. It was very nice.
Absolutely.
And look forward to the next time then.